U.S. President Donald Trump voicing fresh concerns about China that threaten to spark a global trade war. He suggested a blanket duty on imports of Chinese goods because of that country's failure to crack down on the supply of fentanyl precursors.
We're talking about a tariff of 10% on China based on the fact that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico and Canada.
The U.S. president also calling China, that's America's second largest trading partner, and, quote, abuser, and says the tariffs could take effect on the 1st of February. Mr. Trump has repeatedly accused China of engaging in unfair trade practices. On the campaign trail, he threatened repeatedly tariffs as high as 60%. Any duties would be in addition to existing levies on Chinese goods. Beijing has warned against protectionism, saying, quote, it leads nowhere. And for more on these threats of tariffs and what that could mean for the rest of the world, we're joined by our correspondents. Yew Guan standing by in Shanghai, Nick Harper from Washington, D.C., and Neha Poonia live from New Delhi. Let's start with Yew Guan first. Now, Yew Guan, we've just heard China saying this leads nowhere. Protectionism leads nowhere. There is no winner to this. How else has it reacted to these threats of tariffs? And what kind of impact might they have should they be imposed on top of existing tariffs on Chinese goods?
Well, when asked to comment on those Trump's remarks on tariffs, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Miao Ning says that, that, like you said, there are no winners in trade wars and tariff wars. Now, and these comments really echoes word for word what the Chinese Vice Premier Deng Xuexiang said at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Now, during the address ahead of Trump's comments, Vice Premier Deng also said that his country was looking for a win-win solution to trade tensions and wanted to expand its imports. Now, back to today's Foreign Ministry briefing, the spokesperson also added that China has always firmly safeguarded its national interests. This somewhat hints at possible retaliatory moves by China. When asked if Beijing and Washington are communicating on the issue, Miao Ning said that China is willing to maintain communication with the United States, properly handle differences, expand mutually beneficial cooperation, and promote the stable, healthy, and sustainable development of China-US relations. So, in a way, it's the usual diplomatic speak from China, nothing out of the ordinary. But at least the language is still diplomatic, which possibly means there is still room for a deal. Now, as to how it impacts China, well, the impact will certainly be felt by exporters here. Data shows that from January to November 2024, the latest data, China's exports to the United States account for 14.6% of total exports. In other words, for every $7 China earns from its exports, $1 comes from the US. So losing that dollar is bad news, given that the economy is already struggling with lackluster consumption, youth unemployment, and real estate slump. Still, China's exporters are clearly looking for other markets because if you compare the 14.6% I mentioned earlier to the 19% in 2018, that's a difference of about 4 percentage points. There's clearly been a gradual shift away from the American market. Also, you must remember the decline is a result of earlier tariffs. Many Chinese goods are already subjected to tariffs ranging from 7.5% to 25%, depending on the category. In recent months, electric vehicles were slapped with 100% tariffs, semiconductors 50%, lithium-ion batteries 25%. Right. Now, I happened to bump into a Danish expat in Shanghai earlier, and he said that, well, he can still accept 25% because the production chain here is rather efficient. He will have to look for other markets if it increases any further. Wei Su?
Oh, thanks for that, Yew Guan. Let's get Nick Harper's reaction from Washington. Yew Guan mentioned there, however China has reacted to this latest fresh threat, it has kept to diplomatic language. The EU, the other target today mentioned by Mr. Trump, also keeping to that line of diplomatic language. We will stay pragmatic, we will talk, but we will also defend our own interests. Why has the EU come under fire this latest round from Mr. Trump?
Well, so I think Donald Trump is investigating and looking very hard at all of its international trading partners right around the world. And the EU, the bloc, is a huge trading partner for the US. So I guess from that perspective, it makes sense for him to at least look at the arrangement. Now, the US-EU trading accounts for about 30% of all global trade. It's worth over $1.5 trillion every single year. The problem is that increased tariffs would, of course, hurt the GDP of those European countries that export to the US. But in turn, there is a potential that it could hurt US consumers as well. The real fear is that after months of battling high inflation, bringing it down under the Biden administration, these tariffs could in fact push inflation back up again in the United States. Donald Trump, though, says that there is an unfair, unbalanced arrangement with the EU. On Tuesday, he said the European Union is very, very bad for us. He said the US was going to get fairness. Now, Donald Trump maintains the tariffs will not hurt the US. Instead, he says they will protect US businesses and also boost the US economy. In terms of that diplomatic language coming from the European Union, the Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has said that it is a priority for the EU to engage early with the US and that it's standing ready to negotiate, but that the EU will stand by its principles, she said. Remember, of course, it's often a bargaining tactic of the US president to threaten tariffs, and from the EU perspective, up to 20%. The reason being he wants the European Union to buy more US energy in the form of liquefied natural gas. And of course, he's hoping that with these threats, he might get a better deal. We know that there is now an April 1st deadline. He's asked all agencies to do a comprehensive review with all trading partners. So I guess we're looking towards that to see whether that 20% threat on the EU becomes a reality, Wei-Su.
Oh, thanks for that, Nick. Bringing in Neha in New Delhi now, we just heard Nick there. This could be a bargaining tactic. And given that India, which has been put on notice by Mr. Trump before, he has called them a tariff king, India reportedly already looking to lower tariffs and to hike imports. As a bargaining tactic, doing these, carrying out these moves to appease Mr. Trump, how far are they likely to go towards actual appeasement?
Well, India is no stranger to engaging in a trade standoff with the US. That was pretty much the defining theme of the first Trump presidency when it came to New Delhi. We saw Trump back then target New Delhi for its high tariffs, also for not opening up market access for American companies, particularly in the pharmaceutical, dairy and pharma sector. He had also, if you remember, revoked a special trade agreement that allowed hundreds of Indian goods to land in the US at zero tariffs. And back then, New Delhi had held similar negotiations with the Trump administration that it's anticipating might be held this time around as well. And back then, one option it was considering that had reportedly appealed to Trump was signing a mini trade deal. Now, unfortunately, that didn't go anywhere because Trump soon after left office and the Biden administration didn't pursue that further. But that is reportedly one of the options that New Delhi is preemptively considering. It's also looking at ways to buy more goods from the US. It's looking at products like whiskey, steel, oil, dairy, vehicles, medicinal instruments that are made in the US, and also at the same time looking to potentially reduce import tariffs on products such as bourbon whiskey and farm goods as well. And the sense that we get from the reporting that's happening, with sources in the government saying they're clearly readying all possible avenues that they can present to the US in the hopes that one of these options will appeal to the Trump administration. They're also counting on this camaraderie that exists between Trump and Modi, both of them repeatedly referring to each other as their good friends. And one aspect that is currently reportedly playing out is the plan for the two leaders to meet as early as in February. India's foreign minister was representing Prime Minister Modi at the inauguration in Washington, D.C. And one of the first few meetings that the Trump administration has held this week was with the Indian foreign minister. And we understand that plans are afoot to ensure that Trump travels to New Delhi where the two leaders can meet and discuss these issues. So India really counting on Modi and Trump's friendship, helping them tide over what could potentially be tough times in the months ahead.
Well, thanks to Neha Poonia there reporting live from New Delhi. And before that, we had Yew Guan from Shanghai and Nick Harper joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you.